Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Renegade Immortal based on novel. So let's start. There was a very bright and handsome young man wearing black leather clothes standing on a flying sword. He looked different from other cultivators from Shuiyu, which was very refreshing. The female disciple's eyes suddenly lit up, and she shouted, "Senior apprentice brother is back." As for the second disciple, his face suddenly became gloomy, but that was replaced by a happy expression in a flash. Wang Lin could tell from the memories of the core formation cultivator that he really liked the eldest disciple. This eldest disciple had some blood relations with the core formation cultivator. The eldest disciple could just barely be considered a genius. It took him 100 years to reach the peak of the foundation establishment stage, and was only one step away from the core formation stage. But according to the core formation cultivator's memories, the reason he liked this eldest disciple was because of the disciple's looks. He planned to marry his eldest disciple off to the female disciple of another late-stage core formation cultivator to form an alliance. After only a quick glimpse of this memory, Wang Lin no longer paid attention to it. The sword came close and arrived before the ice tower. The eldest disciple knelt on the ground and said, with a clear voice, "Disciple greets master. I was lucky and managed to find the hiding place of those 4-sect alliance remnants." Wang Lin's expression was calm, but this heart suddenly skipped a beat. He did remember seeing in the core formation cultivator's memory that he had sent his eldest disciple out, because a mortal reported to that they had seen someone that didn't look like they were from Shuiyu. So the core formation cultivator sent out his eldest disciple to check up on this matter. This kind of thing wasn't uncommon in the past few years. No matter how powerful the remaining 4-sect alliance cultivators were, after years of being under this bizarre snow, they had all weakened greatly. Although this was the case, Shuiyu couldn't be careless. Normally, when this type of thing happened, it would be reported to the Divine Temple of Ice and Snow. They would then send someone to deal with it. The temple was extremely keen on this. If the report was given today, they would send someone out tomorrow. Wang Lin pondered for a bit, then calmly said, "Lead the way." The eldest disciple was startled. When this happens, his master normally never deals with it personally. However, he knew not to ask, so he only nodded and led the way. The other 2 disciples looked at each other and followed behind. After all, their master was going personally. If they didn't go, then there might be trouble in the future. So they forced themselves to follow Wang Lin. He soon arrived at the restriction. As long as it was a restriction, he wasn't afraid of it. It took only one look to see through this restriction structure. He sent out 2 restriction rings. The 2 restrictions soon started to fuse. Wang Lin stepped through the restriction and went inside. As soon as he entered, he saw a sword move and more than 10 sword chis attacked him. Wang Lin's gaze was calm. His right hand seemed to randomly point in the air and he whispered, "Life." The life and death domain suddenly gathered on Wang Lin's fingertip. This gentle point contained the way of the heavens and was filled with mysteries. A gasp came from the swords. They then started to circle around Wang Lin's finger. The swords were emitting a light as they underwent a change. Now the spiritual energy they released was several times more powerful than before. However, the divine sense was completely erased by the power of the domain. Wang Lin's eyes lit up as he looked at the terrified young man, who was too scared to speak. Behind the young man sat an old man on an ice bed. This person's eyes were closed and his face changed between red and green. After a flick Wang Lin's finger, all of the swords suddenly fell to the ground with a ring. The young man regained his senses. His face was filled with grief and indignation. He clenched his fist and shouted, "You guys destroyed my home, and now you've chased us here. Do you guys have to kill us all? You will kill us today, but someday there will be someone who will destroy Shuiyu." This person's voice was filled with resentment that was now engraved in his bones. After looking at the young man, Wang Lin's gaze fell on the old man. The young man blocked Wang Lin's view. He watched Wang Lin for a bit, then, after pondering for a while, he suddenly knelt to the ground. He bit his lower lip hard until it bled and said, with a bitter smile, "Please don't kill my master, kill me instead. I am the Water Ink Sect's junior sect head. If you capture me and bring me back, you will definitely be rewarded. As long as you let my master go, then I'll willing to go with you. If you don't, you will only be able to get my corpse." Although Wang Lin's eyes were calm, his heart was slightly touched. He slowly looked at the young man and then at the old man. Then he slowly said, "Why do you want to exchange your life for your master's?" The young man was silent for a very long time, before responding with a bitter smile. "Master could have left a long time ago, if it wasn't for me dragging him down. It was all because he tried to save me. Huan quickly get up. This person is not a Shuiyu cultivator. The old man on the ice bed slowly opened his eyes. The young man was startled, but his eyes suddenly lit up and he became very excited. He ran to his master's side and said, "Master, you're awake." Wang Lin took a look at the old man. He clasped his hands and said, "Junior greets senior of the Water Ink sect. This is my home. I was born here, and when I die, it will be here too." Although the old man's voice was soft, there was a hard-to-describe aura within it. Wang Lin looked at the person and no longer spoke. He clasped his hands and turned around to leave. His original plan here was not to kill, but to give a helping hand. After all, he had spent more than 30 years in the Four-Sect Alliance and personally saw the invasion of the Xueyu cultivators. Although it was outside his power to change anything, he would still help when he could. The moment Wang Lin turned around to leave, the old man looked at the bottle of pills and sighed. His right hand suddenly moved and took out a fan, with only 2 feathers remaining. "Little friend, I give this treasure to you for the pills you've given me." After Wang Lin caught the fan, his expression changed. He had a deep impression of this fan. It was used by that woman when she was surrounded by the Four-Sect Alliance's killing formation. He remembered that after she died, this fan was taken away by a late-stage soul formation cultivator. He turned around and carefully looked at the old man. This person was one of the late-stage soul formation cultivators that was in the killing formation. All of the glory of the past was now a distant memory. Wang Lin left with a complicated state of mind. The 3 disciples all didn't dare to speak, they only silently followed him. Soon after Wang Lin left, the 2 came out of the snowy mountain and looked at the direction Wang Lin disappeared to before leaving. At the border, the old man hit the formation to create an opening. He split half of the pills with the young man. He then looked lovingly at the young man and said, "Go. You have to rely on yourself in the future, because Master can't protect you anymore." The young man's eyes were filled with sadness, but before he could say anything, the old man waved his sleeves and pushed the young man through. Then the protection formation returned to normal. The young man stared at his master from the other side. His eyes were red and his voice cracked as he shouted, "Master." The old man let out a laugh and swallowed all of the pills in the bottle. His spiritual energy rapidly climbed back to its peak, though it was just temporary. He waved his sleeves and his body moved. His target was the divine temple of snow and ice at the center of Xueyu. Memories of the past will now be forever distant. The sand in the wind no longer filled the space of dreams. The whimper of the powerful flute is now only an echo in the desolate land. Closing off one door is like cutting off one space and time. The glorious past only remains in the descent songs. Yesterday's song no longer resonate the same way. The whispering complaints can't find its matching music. Opening a window is like hugging a ray of sunlight. Today's dream became the future empire's hope. Even the ordinary you and me need to have exciting displays. Pursuit without regret to feel the might of the world. Opening a window is like welcoming a wave of spring wind. The burst of nothingness awaken what was once lost. The one that fell in the fire must be that immortal phoenix. Even if it must burn its wings, it will still fly in the heavens. The young man looked at his master's back as he left. A scene of the past entered his mind. He kowtowed to his master before clenching his fist and leaving. "I, Chen Huan, swear that I'll wipe out Xueyu." Wang Lin returned to the ice tower with a complicated state of mind. Although he had obtained a powerful treasure, he didn't feel happy. He only felt a sense of melancholy. At this moment, Wang Lin suddenly gained another bit of insight of his life and death domain. What is life, what is death? This question echoed in Wang Lin's mind. The late-stage soul formation cultivator of the Water Ink sect used the last of his cultivation to fly up to the snow fairy statue at the divine temple of snow and ice. Like a moth flying toward a flame, he exploded on the statue, leaving behind a red mark that they couldn't get rid of. Along with him, several other soul formation cultivators were killed in this explosion. All the glory was now gone with the wind. In his death, he died at the right spot. His death awakened the Four-Sect Alliance cultivators that hadn't dared to show their faces. In the blink of an eye, another year passed. Throughout this year, Wang Lin kept thinking about the life and death domain, and he gradually gained more insight. His own being had undergone a transformation in this past year. Looking at a mountain as a mountain, looking at a river as a river. However, Wang Lin noticed that sometimes a mountain isn't mountain, and a river isn't a river. It was as if there was another layer of fog blocking his eyes. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. When he reached out, he couldn't touch it. This type of thing won't go away with time. He would need a sudden burst of insight to get past the fog. Autumn passed and spring came. 2 more years in this icy world passed. Wang Lin was able to make some progress regarding the creation of the ice sculpture puppets. These ice sculpture puppets relied on snow blood veins to maintain themselves. A puppet with 49 snow blood veins could achieve a core formation cultivator's power. To be as powerful as a nascent soul cultivator, one would need 81 snow blood veins, but with these ice sculptures, the more veins a puppet has, the harder it is to control. And if 2 veins touch, the ice sculpture will explode. Because of this, the difficulty increases exponentially with each additional snow blood vein. Thus, one can see how difficult putting 81 blood veins into an ice sculpture is. This is why there were so few nascent soul ice sculptures produced by Xueyu. In addition to this, the snow blood veins come from the icy snow tactic. Wang Lin was amazed by this technique. In the blink of an eye, Wang Lin had already stayed in this small city for 3 years. Adding on the 1 year he had spent traveling, 4 years had passed. Only 1 year left until 10 years was up. He could feel that the time for him to reach the soul formation stage was coming. He didn't know if he would trigger divine retribution when he reaches the soul formation stage. However, as he got closer to it, he realized that when he reaches the soul formation stage, it will create a disturbance that will alert everyone. So on this day, Wang Lin walked out of the ice tower and left. Before he left, Xueyu had sent out a decree for all core formation and above cultivators to gather at the temple to receive a Tao lecture. The reason was that one of the 13 cultivators that had gone to Suzuka had returned. He was the only person that had succeeded in reaching the soul transformation stage. As for whether only one of the 13 succeeded or if Suzuka had done something, it was not something for outsiders to know. Wang Lin silently left without anyone knowing. Even the core formation cultivator that Wang Lin had trapped had lost his memory and regained his original position. Before he returned home, he went to the town to check on Da Nyo and saw that Da Nyo had opened up another ironworks shop. His wife was not young anymore, but she was clearly pregnant again. Wang Lin let out a smile as he looked at them. That new life was growing by the day. When he left a bit of spiritual energy inside Da Nyo's wife. That bit of spiritual energy could guarantee the mother's and daughter's safety. The new life was a girl. Da Nyo still didn't know that the uncle Wang he had always wanted to see again had come to see him. Da Nyo's only regret at death was not that Xiao Nyo was not here to see him off, but that he never got to see the uncle the Wang who had watched him grow up again. That mysterious person who opened a shop, who he always pulled customers for, and who managed to sell a carving for 10 pieces of gold. He gave those 2 wood carvings to his daughter and they became family heirlooms. Wang Lin flew toward Zhao. 40 years ago, he walked the same road when he had just reached the nascent soul stage. Today he was going back through the same road, but this time he was about to reach the soul formation stage and was choosing a location to do so. The Wang Lin now and the Wang Lin then were as different as heaven and earth. He passed through one ancient transfer array after another. On this day, he was in a strange land where clouds filled the sky and rain began to fall. The rain began to fall harder and harder until it seemed like water was being poured down. Wang Lin looked at the sky. It had been a long time since he had seen rain this heavy. He couldn't help but think back to when he was in the same room with Zhong Hu back at the Hengyu sect. The rain poured while lightning and thunder fell from the sky. At this moment, rays of lightning flashed across the sky like silver snakes. They looked very beautiful. Wang Lin's body slowly landed on the ground. He didn't even use a technique to block the rain. Instead, he waved his hand at a nearby tree, and the leaves on the tree gathered to form a leaf umbrella. Wang Lin walked in this foreign land with his umbrella. He was only 2 ancient transfer arrays away from reaching Zhao. In an area 40,000 kilometers to the east was where the ancient transfer array was located. After a long time, shouts came from a distance. A few large men wearing rain cloaks came while yelling. This damn weather. Once it starts raining, it never stops. There is a temple ahead, let's hide in there for a while. We can continue our travel once the rain lightens up. As they were talking, they saw Wang Lin inside the temple. They all paused and looked at each other before silently walking toward the temple. When they walked past Wang Lin, one of them took a step toward Wang Lin and seemed to have tried reaching toward him with his right hand for a gentle pat. However, another person from the group let out a grunt and pushed that person to stop him. That person turned his head and let out a snort before silently entering the temple. The 5 of them took off their rain cloaks, set up a fire, took out some food, and began to loudly chat with each other. However, every now and then, their gazes would turn to Wang Lin. The large fellow looked at Wang Lin with a curious gaze and laughed. Brother Da Nyo, why don't we sit down and talk in this rainy night? Wang Lin faintly smiled and nodded before sitting cross-legged on the ground. He waved his right hand and a gourd of wine appeared. He took a drink. After the 4-sect alliance was destroyed, Wang Lin's stock of this fruit wine had decreased, so he drank it a lot less often now. That large fellow let out a laugh, sat down, and said, Brother Daenyo's cultivation is really shocking. If I'm not seeing this wrong, you're close to obtaining your domain. Wang Lin's heart skipped a bit. He became even more cautious of this person, but on the outside, he just quietly chuckled and dodged the question. At this moment, one of the men next to the fire laughed loudly. What in the world are you two talking about? We can't understand a word of what you are talking about. Obtaining your domain. Are you two crazy? Moji faintly smiled and said, Sir, your use of the word crazy is excellent. If one isn't crazy, why would they try to understand something like the laws of the heavens? If one isn't crazy, why would they try to become an immortal? One must want something in order to obtain it. That is the truth. The man next to the fire frowned and scolded, he really is crazy. I didn't understand a word. Moji smiled and shook his head. He looked at Wang Lin and asked, Did Brother Daenyo understand? Wang Lin let out a faint smile and said, Your words are too mysterious. I don't understand, but I think the word crazy is not good. Instead, the word eat is better. Moji's eyes lit up and he laughed. Good. Eat is a very good word. If us cultivators lost the urge to eat, then how could we go down the right path and complete the Tao of the heavens? Wang Lin took a drink and silently smiled. Moji looked at Wang Lin, then his eyes suddenly showed confusion and then were filled with void. Wang Lin's eyes met his and his heart skipped a beat. He then quietly moved his hand over his bag of holding. After a long time, the confusion in Moji's eyes slowly disappeared. Just now, where were we at? Wang Lin brows furrowed as he stared at Moji. At this moment, one of the men next to the fire, the one who had been listening in on them, laughed. He really is crazy, the man said. Moji let out a sigh and smiled at Wang Lin. Forget it. Since I forgot. My name is Moji. What is your name? Wang Lin's brow furrowed even harder. After a while, he shook his head and let out a faint smile as he said, Daenyo. Moji looked at Wang Lin apologetically. He hesitated for a bit and said, I believe brother also knows what my name is. May I ask for your name? Just like before Wang Lin could respond, another man next to the fire responded, his name is Daenyo. Moji's eyes became even more apologetic as he said, Ever since I obtained my domain, my memory has been a mess. I hope brother Daenyo can forgive me. Wang Lin's expression remained the same, but his heart was shocked. He hesitated for a bit before asking, what domain did brother Mo comprehend? Directly asking someone their domain was somewhat taboo, but Moji didn't seem to mind. The confusion in his eyes became even stronger and he said, Forget domain. Hey, you haven't said what death is yet. Continue what you were saying. It was getting interesting. One of the men next to the fire hurried Moji. The confusion in Moji's eyes became even stronger as he said, What is death? Death is to die. If a person dies, then it is death, and if the heart dies, then it forgets, that is death. Wang Lin's heart shook. That sentence was like a gust that blew away a lot of the fog that had left him confused. Death was to die. If a person dies, it is death. If the heart dies, then it forgets. Moji's confused eyes were filled with wisdom as he looked around before pointing at a puddle outside with this right hand. He muttered, The water falling in this puddle today is life. Tomorrow, when there is no water falling, then this puddle is death. Dead water is water without life and flow. Then his right hand casually pointed again, and this time, it was on the men next to the fire. The void in his eyes became even stronger and he said, Today they can enjoy, be angry, be sad, or be happy. That is life. In the future, they won't be able to enjoy, be angry, be sad, or be happy, and that is death. His hand suddenly moved and pointed at a praying mat. He said, This shrine was alive when the statue of the god was here. Now that it is without it, it is dead. Speaking of this, he stood up, pointed at the sky and said, These raindrops are born in the sky and die on the earth. What's in the middle is their life. I look at this rain not for the sky, earth, or the rain itself, but the raindrop's entire life, this cycle of life and death. Wang Lin was touched. He stood up and respectfully bowed toward Moji. Moji faintly smiled. He then took a step and left the shrine like a meteor. His faint voice came from the distance and said, Brother Daenyo, you either understand it or you don't. Know your limits. Wang Lin stared at the rain. After a long time, he let out a smile. At this moment, the men around the fire were all confused. They felt like they understood a bit, but when they thought about it carefully, there seemed to be a layer of fog blocking their eyes. This is life and death. Fire is life because it has life. This is what they mean by a live fire. Death is to die. If a person dies, it is death. If the heart dies, then it forgets. Wang Lin was walking between the heavens and earth when he suddenly felt something in his heart. He managed to grasp a bit of the truth behind life and death. He originally needed 1 more year of cultivating his domain to reach the soul formation stage. However, his comprehension suddenly grew, and after a short while, he was already at the state to reach the soul formation stage. It could be said that at this moment, if Wang Lin wished to, he could immediately reach the soul formation stage. But this was obviously not the place to reach the soul formation stage. Wang Lin suppressed the urge to break through and flew even faster. I believe Brother Mo's domain is heart's death, and this results in his memory loss. To forget everything, leaving only the Tao. Wang Lin took a deep breath. This Mo Ji was a genius. The insight he had gained in the shrine on that rainy night allowed Wang Lin's mentality to finally reach the level of soul formation. At this moment, he was worthy of reaching the soul formation stage, and had the domain of a soul formation cultivator. The soul formation stage is where the strength of cultivators begin to vary greatly. This is because once cultivators reach the soul formation stage, their focus of cultivation changes from their bodies to their minds. Their basis is their understanding of the heavens, and their strength is how well they can control that power. The domain is the most important insight for cultivators above the soul formation stage. According to the difference in understanding of the heavens, the domains obtained are different too. In other words, there are countless domains out there, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a difference in strength between the domains. Although the domains are very close in strength when they reach their extremes, the starting points are very different and can definitely affect future cultivation. In truth, there are 2 ways to reach the soul formation stage. The first method is to follow someone else's footsteps and copy their domain. This method is much easier than the second one, but the difficult part is that not many soul formation cultivators are willing to display their domain. Only peak nascent soul cultivators in large sects are given the privilege to see them. The second method is to completely rely on yourself to try to comprehend the heavens to find your own domain. This method is very difficult. It requires a lot of perseverance and luck to succeed, but once you have found your own domain, you will be much stronger than those that went with the first method. In general, only those who can't obtain their own domain after trying for a long time choose the first method. After all, there is a huge difference in power between the 2 methods. This gap is something that is almost impossible to close, whether it is at the start or far in the future. However, not many people can comprehend their own domain, so a majority of cultivators choose the first method. This is why some soul formation cultivators are killed and others can live on peacefully. The messenger back in Zhao chose the first method, which is why he decided to run after seeing Wang Lin's magic treasure. However, nothing is absolute, as there are cultivators who choose the first method who manage to break through to the soul transformation stage, but there are simply too few of these people, and they are very weak among soul transformation cultivators. Thus, the people who choose the first method focus on obtaining pills to raise their cultivation level, but how could pills that contain celestial spiritual energy be so easy to obtain? Wang Lin flew in the rain until he arrived at the ancient transfer array. The transfer array lit up and his body disappeared. This time, Wang Lin didn't stop at all and used his full speed to move to the next transfer array. 1 month later, waves of spiritual energy shot up in a valley at the edge of Zhao. As the spiritual energy disappeared, a young man walked out. It was Wang Lin. Looking at the land before him, Wang Lin felt a burst of melancholy. Zhao wasn't very big. With just his divine sense, he was easily able to see everything that was happening. After Wang Lin's killing spree, the cultivators of Zhao had weakened greatly, especially with the deaths of several late-stage nascent soul cultivators. This was a huge blow to Zhao. In these past few decades, all of the sect's doors were closed. When his figure appeared outside of the Xiandao sect, he saw white fog covering the entire sect. Even the little passage up the mountain was blocked. The Xiandao sect had long closed its doors and no longer communicated with the outside. Wang Lin let out a sigh. Instead of making a commotion to force people to come out, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the back mountain of the Xiandao sect. The back mountain, where he went through 4 years of closed-door cultivation, was still there. There were a few cultivators around, but their expressions were very lethargic and depressed. How could they notice Wang Lin's presence? Wang Lin found the cave he had cultivated in back then and walked into it. There was no one inside the cave. Once Wang Lin went inside, the rock at the entrance slowly fell. Wang Lin sat cross-legged inside the cave and examined its interior. Familiar memories entered his mind. He let out a sigh and began to cultivate. 10 days later, Wang Lin finished tuning his body. His hand formed a seal and he pressed it on his stomach. The color of his face changed between red and green and his body soon split into 2. His original body came out of his avatar with a head of white hair over his shoulders, a grin, and a purple star that released an evil light. This original body's cultivation level was still at the late stage of core formation. His G realm hadn't evolved, so his original body's cultivation level still couldn't improve. Even though he could boost his G realm to the nascent soul level when he was fused together with his avatar, there were still limitations and drawbacks, so it was not a long-term solution. As for his avatar, it was about to reach the soul formation stage. After fusing with his original body, this avatar's one flaw of only having 30 years to live disappeared, so now it was no different from his original body. At this moment, he was about to reach the soul formation stage, and if he was still fused with his original body, it would interfere with the process of breaking through. Wang Lin began to ponder. If his original body's cultivation stayed the same, then there would be too many drawbacks. He had already started to consider this matter several years ago, but couldn't make a decision. However, his understanding of the life and death domain had increased greatly, especially after the event at the shrine. His hesitant heart finally made a decision. His original body couldn't walk the same path as his avatar, so the G realm had to be separated from it. This spiritual power gathered at the avatar's finger. Soon, all of the spiritual energy condensed into a silver liquid. The original body suddenly grew much weaker, but its eyes were still calm. Then, slivers of spiritual energy came from the original body's flesh and bones. This spiritual energy moved to the original body's dantian and slowly formed a ring. This was the foundation of a cultivator, which was also the symbol of a foundation establishment cultivator. This ring slowly became more solid and became even brighter and brighter. This time, the avatar pointed at the original body's dantian. The original body shook, as the ring shattered into spiritual energy, and gathered at the fingertip of the avatar. Then the original body's cultivation level dropped rapidly. 14th layer of Qi condensation. 13th layer. 12th layer. 8th layer. 6th layer, all the way until the 1st layer. At this moment, all of the spiritual energy in the original body disappeared. His whole body suddenly fell over, leaned against the wall, and began to breath rapidly. However, this entire time, its eyes were still calm. In those eyes, a bolt of red lightning flashed. The avatar took a deep breath. This time, his finger pointed to the spot between the original body's eyes. Suddenly, that ray of red lightning flew out. Just as it was about to leave through one of the walls, the avatar let out a roar. His hand moved and rings of light trapped the red lightning. He reached out to grab it. The red lightning struggled for a bit before finally giving up and stopped moving. The avatar grabbed the red lightning and morphed it into a drop of blood before putting it into his bag of holding. This drop of blood was the G realm. The original body gave up its cultivation to force the G realm out, completely turning it into a magic treasure-like existence. Shortly after, the original body barely managed to sit up straight and closed his eyes. At this moment, the avatar flicked the spiritual energy from the foundation ring into the original body. Then the liquid formed by the core was also sent into the original body. At this moment, Wang Lin's original body and avatar walked down two very different paths. The original body was focused on refining the body, walking down the path of the ancient gods. The avatar focused on the inside, walking down the path of the heavens. Both were Wang Lin's bodies, without any difference, but before he reaches a certain point, his two bodies can't be fused together for a long period of time. But once he fuses, his power will increase several-fold. But after the enlightenment in the old shrine, he was able to understand the mysteries of his life and death domain. As a result, Wang Lin decided to have his original body walk the path of the ancient gods. Wang Lin looked at his original body, which was currently cultivating. He opened his bag of holding and took out several blood drops filled with killing intent, and then pointed at the original body's brow. The blood drops flew into the original body one by one. The original body's white hair immediately turned red, and his killing intent reached its peak. At this moment, the original body seemed a bit similar to Ti Sen from the land of the ancient god. After a long time, the original body finished absorbing all the spiritual energy and opened his eyes. His eyes had no pupils, they were only two masses of red. Combined with the red hair, he didn't look human. Instead, he looked like an ancient demon. Wang Lin and his original body both let out a faint smiles. However, their smiles would shock anyone who saw them. The original body's smile was filled with the sense of being far above others, while the avatar's smile was filled with bloodlust. Wang Lin slapped his bag of holding and took out several hundred bottles of pills. This was a large majority of the pills Li Muwen had given him back then. The moment those pills appeared, the original body opened its mouth. All of the bottles broke as the pills flew into its mouth, turned into spiritual energy, and moved through its body. The ancient god's tactic worked frantically inside his body to absorb all of the spiritual energy from the pills. Gradually, the original body became even harder, and had a slightly metallic sheen. Finally, golden threads came out of the original body's pores, and his clothes all disappeared as well. The number of golden threads increased as more pills entered his mouth and the ancient god's tactic operated. Finally, the golden threads intertwined and formed a golden cocoon. Waves of pressure came out of the golden cocoon. The beating sound of a powerful heart come from inside the cocoon. However, no one but the avatar could hear this sound. The avatar stared at the golden cocoon the original body was in and sat down to guard it. 13 days later, the beating inside the golden cocoon became even louder. It was like a beating drum. Finally, when that sound reached its peak, a crack appeared on the golden cocoon. After the original body appeared, it silently pondered and looked at the avatar. The avatar slapped his bag of holding and took out a flying sword. He pointed at the original body and the flying sword flew at it. The original body didn't block, it let the flying sword attack it. At the moment of impact, there was a sound of two metal objects colliding. Sounds of two metal objects hitting each other continued and even sparks appeared. The original body casually reached and grabbed the flying sword. It tightened its hold and, with a crack, the flying sword broke into pieces and became useless metal. The original body and avatar both let out smiles of satisfaction. After pondering a little, the original body sank into the ground and disappeared. According to the memories of the ancient god, if a baby ancient god hasn't been tested at the center of the planet, then he will never become a true ancient god. When Wang Lin decided on this road, he had already made his decision. The original body continued to sink into the earth until it reached a point where the pressure would be too powerful even for cultivators. However, with the help of the ancient god's tactic, the original body didn't feel anything and continued to descend. Even Wang Lin wasn't sure how far it had descended, but his original body still hadn't reached the center of Suzaku. He made a rough estimate and believed that he was 1/6 of the way there. However, this was already the limit of the original body. If he were to continue to descend, his body would collapse. After all, in ancient times, the adult ancient gods would surround the baby ancient god in a drop of their blood to provide for the baby and help protect the baby from the powerful pressure at the center of the planet. One must cultivate in solitude, endure the solitude, and finally, enjoy the solitude. Also, the disappearance of the ancient gods weighted on Wang Lin's heart like a giant rock. In ancient times, after Tu Sai died, some unimaginable things happened that caused the celestial realm to be destroyed. The ancient celestials went extinct, the ancient gods went extinct, and this even affected the ancient cultivation world, causing the cultivation union to appear. Although all of those things were very distant from Wang Lin, once someone learns that Wang Lin was cultivating the path of the ancient gods, those things might not be so distant anymore. Therefore, Wang Lin could not let anyone know that he had an original body following the path of the ancient gods. Otherwise, there would be disaster coming his way. After the original body left, Wang Lin's avatar looked up while inside the cave. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the cave walls and saw the sky above it. Wang Lin softly said the two words, soul formation. He stretched out his arms as his life and death domain began to slowly spread. It covered the entire back mountain, it covered the Xiandao sect, and continued to spread. Slowly, the life and death domain continued to spread until it covered all of Zhao. He slowly closed his eyes as he comprehended the laws of the heavens and the life and death domain. At this moment, whether it was the mortals or cultivators, everyone felt something in their hearts. The mortals could only experience a mysterious feeling, but all of the cultivators began to panic. The expressions of the few nascent soul cultivators in Zhao greatly changed and they flew out from their various sects to check what was going on. However, with their cultivation levels, they would only feel and not locate where it was coming from. Not to mention them, even the few remaining nascent soul cultivators in the Xiandao sect didn't know that the source of this feeling was in their back mountain. As the sense of calmness spread, a few of the nascent soul cultivators noticed that this heavenly change was coming from the Xiandao sect. The Xiandao sect was now empty after the few nascent soul cultivators ordered everyone else to leave. All of the disciples of the Xiandao sect were now kneeling outside the sect. These nascent soul cultivators were all very nervous, as they had a guess as to what was going on. That guess was that there was a guest reaching the soul formation stage here, but this guess was too unbelievable, and it caused them to be very nervous. Although they had never experienced these kinds of changes in the heavens before, they had read about them in ancient records. It was a bit different from the records, but this kind of change could only happen when someone was reaching the soul formation stage. At this moment, one question appeared in the remaining nascent soul cultivators' minds. Who the hell was reaching the soul formation stage here? Why did this person choose to do it here? Could this person be someone from Zhao? This speculation from the people that vaguely understood what was happening caused them to become extremely excited. This type of excitement was something they had never felt before. Wang Lin sat cross-legged inside the cave, and at this moment his body was emitting a rainbow-colored light. In this light, Wang Lin had the air of an immortal. Gradually, a little person that looked exactly like Wang Lin flew out from his forehead. This was his nascent soul. The nascent soul slowly floated upward until it completely left Wang Lin's body. The nascent soul also opened its arms and remained in the same position as the body. The spiritual energy in the heavens suddenly found an outlet. It rapidly gathered around Wang Lin and formed a giant vortex in the back mountain of the Xian Dao sect. This vortex was now visible to everyone near it. It looked like a funnel and grew larger and larger at the top. Then the sky changed as a giant black hole appeared in the cloudless sky. Inside the black hole, one could see stars shining. Wang Lin seemed to notice, and his nascent soul raised its head. Its gaze pierced through the cave and stared into the black hole. His heart immediately shook. He remembered this scene from the ancient god's memory. This was the space outside of planet Suzaku. When a cultivator reaches the soul formation stage, their nascent soul will go through a series of changes. This process requires a large amount of spiritual energy. During this process, one can use their domain to open up a passage to the sky and use that boundless spiritual energy to help them reach the soul formation stage. This is a chance every cultivator has when they reach the soul formation stage. The appearance of the black hole above Zhao caused the mortals to become even more pious. It was as if a heavenly pressure had washed over them, removing all distractions and letting them focus on their respect for this heavenly pressure. The closer the mortals were to the black hole, the more they were affected. This was especially true for the village right next to the Xian Dao sect, as every child was staring dumbfoundedly at the black hole. If there was a cultivator around, they would be able to see a faint belt of light above their foreheads that connected to the black hole. In reality, whenever a cultivator is about to reach the soul formation stage in a rank 4 cultivation country, they return to their own country. Every time a cultivator reaches the soul formation stage, the black hole that appears causes the mortals around it to change. Those without a spirit root can gain one. This is one of the reasons why rank 4 cultivation countries can completely suppress rank 3 cultivation countries. Every time a cultivator reaches the soul formation stage, they produce a lot of mortals who can cultivate as well. Wang Lin didn't know any of this. At this moment, he had completely fused with his life and death domain to experience the laws of the heavens. As more and more spiritual energy entered Wang Lin's nascent soul, his nascent soul rose higher and higher. The stone wall didn't stop his nascent soul at all, and his nascent soul slowly flew out of the back mountain. At this moment, all of the surrounding cultivators saw something they would never forget. They saw a mini person, who was emanating a rainbow-colored light, and sitting cross-legged slowly rise into the air. The moment the nascent soul appeared, the surrounding spiritual energy rushed toward the nascent soul. The nascent soul's hand also began to rapidly form different seals. This process lasted for a long time. Wang Lin's nascent soul began to form the seals even faster as spiritual energy poured into him. He eventually started producing after-images. The rainbow-colored light around the nascent soul gradually began to converge back into it until it was completely contained within the nascent soul. Shortly after, Wang Lin's nascent soul became transparent, as if it would disappear at any time. At this moment, the black hole in the sky spat out the last bit of spiritual energy, then gradually closed and disappeared. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.